The stars outside the viewport of the Celestia seemed wrong, as though they had shifted subtly while no one was looking. Lila Kessler stared at the holographic display, her name flickering across it in distorted text. Lila, come home. She clenched her fists, the words pulling at something deep within her, a memory she couldn't quite grasp. The signal had started as a faint anomaly 3 days ago, a whisper on the edge of known space, but it had grown louder, stronger, as the Celestia approached the rift. Now it wasn't just broadcasting her name, it was demanding her attention. Commander, the signal's overriding external comms, Ivan Reyes said from the communications console. His voice was tight, his fingers flying across the controls. It's latching onto our systems like it's alive. Whatever this is, it's targeting you. Lila kept her voice steady, though her heart raced. Isolate it. I want all non-essential systems locked down. It's not that simple, Ivan replied. The signal's frequency changes every few seconds like it's learning our defenses. Cut it off manually if you have to, Lila snapped. But even as she said it, the signal pulsed again, flooding the ship with static. For a brief moment, she swore she heard a whisper. Soft, pleading, and achingly familiar. Lila, the voice murmured. Help me. She shivered, the voice triggering a flicker of déjà vu. She had never been to this sector of space before, yet the rift felt hauntingly familiar, like a place she had seen in a nightmare. Commander, Dr. Elise Merrick, the ship's xenolinguist, spoke up, her expression pale. I've decoded part of the transmission. It's not just a message, it's a directive. The coordinates it's broadcasting, they lead directly into the rift. Lila frowned. And the language? Dr. Merrick hesitated, glancing at her datapad. It's ancient Earth dialect, pre-unification, obscure. But there's something else. The phrasing matches fragments from classified EOS station archives. Lila froze. The EOS station? That was decommissioned over a century ago. More like it disappeared, Ivan corrected grimly. Last seen near the rift. No survivors, no wreckage, just gone. Before Lila could respond, Lieutenant Anders chimed in, his usual bravado undercut by unease. We're not seriously going in there, are we? Everyone knows the rift is a death trap. We're not going in, Lila said sharply. Not yet. We'll approach the coordinates and scan from a safe distance. Anders muttered something under his breath but didn't argue further. As the Celestia adjusted course, the rift came into view, a swirling void of iridescent light and shadow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the signal. It was mesmerizing, a paradox of beauty and terror. Lila couldn't tear her eyes away. Commander, Ivan said quietly. The signal's intensity just doubled. It's like it knows we're coming. Lila stared at the rift, her chest tightening. A memory surfaced unbidden. Her younger self standing in a dimly lit lab, alarms blaring as a glowing orb consumed the air around her. She blinked, and the memory vanished. Prepare a drone, she ordered. We're not risking the ship until we know what's out there. As the crew scrambled to execute her command, the signal shifted again, the voice growing louder, more insistent. Lila, you left me. Don't leave again. For the first time, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a distress call, it was a warning. The drone slipped silently into the rift, its camera feed flickering to life on the central display. The crew of the Celestia gathered around, their faces pale and tense as the screen illuminated a scene that defied explanation. The rift's interior wasn't empty. It was filled with fragmented debris, shattered ships, and structures that floated as if caught in a slow-motion explosion. Among them was a massive station, its skeletal remains glowing faintly with an unnatural light. That's the EOS station, Dr. Merrick whispered, her voice trembling. It shouldn't be here. It was lost over a century ago. The drone's feed zoomed in, revealing the station's pockmarked surface. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, glowing faintly in the rift's light. They pulsed rhythmically, almost in sync with the signal's transmission. Those markings, Marek continued, her tone shifting to a mix of awe and dread. They're warnings, ancient glyphs used to mark places of contamination or forbidden zones. Forbidden by who? Anders asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Humans? Aliens? Ghosts? By anyone who valued survival, Marek shot back. Focus, Lila interrupted. Her eyes were fixed on the screen as the drone moved deeper into the station. The air on the bridge felt heavy, oppressive, as though the rift itself was pressing down on them. Energy readings are spiking, Ivan reported. The station's core is active, barely. It's putting out just enough power to sustain something. Something? Anders scoffed. Real reassuring, Reyes. Cut the chatter, Lila said. She leaned forward, gripping the console as the drone entered a cavernous chamber at the heart of the station. The walls were covered in the same glowing symbols, their light shifting as though alive. At the center of the room was the source of the signal, a massive orb suspended in a web of metallic tendrils. It pulsed with a sickly light, casting long, twisting shadows. What is that? Ivan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Marek's face was ashen. It looks like a quantum singularity containment device, but the design, it's not human. At least, not entirely. The orb pulsed again, and the signal surged through the ship. Everyone on the bridge flinched as the whispering voice returned, louder and clearer than before. Lila, do you remember me? Lila's breath caught. The voice was achingly familiar, though she couldn't place it. It wasn't just speaking. It was pleading. I don't know you, she whispered, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. Yes, you do, the voice replied, tinged with sadness. You were there when they made me. You watched as they turned me into this. Fragments of memory surfaced again. A sterile lab, the hum of machinery, a child's laughter turning to screams. Lila pressed a hand to her temple, willing the images away. Commander, Ivan said, breaking the spell. The orb's energy output just spiked. It's interacting with the drone. On the screen, the orb's light intensified and the drone's feed grew erratic. The tendrils twitched, extending toward the device as though alive. Then, with a burst of static, the feed cut out entirely. Drone's offline, Ivan confirmed, his voice tight. I've lost control. The ship's lights flickered, and a low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. The signal's voice returned, echoing through every system on the ship. You left me to this fate, Lila, but now you're here, and you'll finish what you started. The lights surged back on, bathing the bridge in cold, sterile brightness. Lila gripped the console, her mind racing. Whoever or whatever this entity was, it knew her. And it wanted something only she could give. We're pulling back, she said, forcing steel into her voice. Get us out of the rift. No, the voice boomed, its tone shifting to something darker, more menacing. You can't leave, not again. The Celestia shuddered violently and alarms blared as the ship was gripped by an unseen force. Lila's knuckles whitened as she stared out the viewport at the rift, which now seemed alive, its colors swirling with malevolent intent. We've been caught, Ivan said, panic creeping into his voice. The station, it's pulling us in. Lila's heart pounded as the ship lurched forward, helpless against the pull. Whatever waited for her on the EO station wasn't just calling her, it was demanding her return. The Celestia groaned as unseen forces dragged it closer to the EO station. The rift's iridescent tendrils spiraled around the ship, their colors shifting in a way that made Lila's vision blur. The bridge lights dimmed again, leaving only the ghostly glow of the rift to illuminate the room. Reverse thrusters, Lila barked. Full power! Get us out of here! Thrusters are non-responsive, Ivan said, his voice tight with fear. Whatever's holding us, it's not physical. It's like the station itself has latched onto us. Lila turned to Anders. Weapon systems? Useless, he replied grimly. We'd blow ourselves up before we'd even scratch that thing. Before Lila could issue another order, the ship jolted, and every monitor on the bridge flickered to life. The screens displayed a younger version of Lila, dressed in a research uniform, standing in a pristine lab. The image looped, showing her entering data, laughing with colleagues, and finally staring at something off-screen. her expression one of dawning horror. "That's me," she whispered, her voice hollow. The entity spoke again, its voice resonating through the ship's hull. "You were there when they tried to harness the rift. You were the one who sealed me inside." "I don't remember," Lila said, though her trembling hands betrayed her growing doubt. "I've never been here before." The memories she'd suppressed began to surface, piecing themselves together like a puzzle she didn't want to solve. She saw the EO station, bustling with scientists and engineers, its goal to study the rift's potential as an energy source. They had created the orb, a device meant to stabilize the rift's chaotic energy. But something had gone wrong. The experiment had awakened something within the rift, something alive. The screens flickered, shifting to show the orb as it was first activated. Tendrils of light erupted from it, lashing out at the scientists. Chaos ensued, alarms blaring, people screaming, and Lila standing frozen as the orb's light filled the room. She remembered the look on the child's face, a child who shouldn't have been there. The memory hit her like a freight train. The child had been part of the project, a test subject. They had fused his consciousness with the rift's energy to stabilize it. But the process had failed, leaving him trapped between dimensions. "You let them do this to me," the voice said, trembling with anger and sorrow. "You watched as they turned me into this thing. And then you ran?" Lila's knees buckled and she sank into her chair. "I was just following orders," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. I didn't know it would come to this." "But you knew enough to run," the voice said, venomous now. "You saved yourself and left me to rot." The ship jolted again and Lila's head snapped up. The rift was pulling them closer to the station's core, where the orb glowed brighter than ever. Its tendrils writhed, reaching for the ship as though welcoming it home. "We have to fight this," Anders shouted, drawing his sidearm as if he could shoot his way out of the situation. "You can't fight what you don't understand," Merrick said, her voice breaking. "This isn't just an entity, it's him. A human mind fused with the rift. It's too far gone." "No," Lila said, forcing herself to stand. "Not too far gone. It's why it called me. It remembers me." The bridge fell silent as everyone turned to her. The orb's glow pulsed in time with her heartbeat, the signal now a steady, resonant hum. Lila took a shaky breath. "There's only one way to stop this. I have to go to the station." "That's suicide," Anders said. "You step foot on that thing and you're dead." "Maybe," Lila said. "But if I don't, we're all dead." Without waiting for approval, she grabbed her helmet and headed for the airlock. Ivan's protests and Anders's curses faded behind her as she entered the launch bay. The rift's pull grew stronger as the station loomed larger in the viewport. The shuttle detached with a shudder, and Lila piloted it toward the station. The orb's tendrils reached out to her, but they didn't attack. Instead, they guided her, pulling her deeper into the core. The air grew heavy, suffused with the faint scent of ozone and decay. The core chamber was exactly as she remembered it from the feeds, massive, alien, and alive. The orb's light bathed her in an eerie glow as she stepped forward, her boots echoing against the metallic floor. "Lila," the voice said, softer now. "You came back." "I came to finish what we started," she said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "Tell me what you want." The orb pulsed, and for a moment, the light dimmed, revealing the faint outline of a child's face within. "I want to be free," it whispered. Lila hesitated, her hands trembling. "If I free you, will you let my crew go?" The entity's silence was deafening. Then, slowly, it replied, "Yes, but freedom has a cost." The orb's tendrils lashed out, enveloping her in blinding light. Pain tore through her body and she screamed as the rift consumed her. The last thing she saw was the child's face, smiling faintly before everything went dark. On the Celestia, the lights flickered back on and the ship's systems roared to life. The crew stared out the viewport as the rift began to collapse, taking the EO station with it. But Lila was gone, and in the void where the rift once was, a faint signal echoed. "Lila." Thank you.